when you launch InDesign, InDesign is primarily for layout. I mean, you got magazines, flyers, book covers, newspapers, if you remember what those things are. Anything that deals with print, meaning text and images together, brochures, anything you see text or type and images or graphics combined together, it was probably made in this program. You have Photoshop for editing photos, Illustrator for doing different illustrations, logo creation, or creating vector graphics. And in InDesign, you put it all together in here. So primarily you would make the photos or edit the photos in Photoshop, export them as TIFF files, TIFF. We'll go over that when we get to Photoshop. From Illustrator, you save them as EPSs, and we'll go over that when we get to Illustrator. And then you would, generally speaking, be copying and pasting the text or typing the text into the program. So when you first get started, this is generally the open screen. It has what you recently worked on recently. Go to Create New to make your first document. So now when you go to Create New, can you all see the Create New screen?
Yes.
Okay. So by default, it has, the recent custom size. These are probably different times I've pressed Command V to copy something. So you can change it to inches or pixels. Say, for example, if you're doing a banner or for a social media website, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you're going to want to work in pixels because that's the measurements that's dealing with virtual, meaning the web or digital space. If you're doing anything print, flyer, brochure, banner, it's going to be in inches. So to make it easy, we're going to go with a standard sheet of paper. So 8.5 width by 11 height, which is the standard sheet of paper. So now, if you look at this, for example, you say a magazine is 64 to 100 pages. This is where you put in the amount of pages. So for now, I'm going to put in 6. I mean, I'm going to put in 4. So when you're doing a print design, if it's going to be in a booklet form, whether it be like a program or a catalog, you have to do it in sets of 4 because one piece of paper prints 4 pages. Make sense? So one sheet of paper, folded in half, that's 4 pages, back and front. So you design it so when you're designing, you have to make sure you're designing in sets of 4. Because if you don't, you're going to have one extra sheet that doesn't have anything on it because the paper is still going to have, 2 sheets of paper make 8 pages, right? So check facing pages. This means, for example, again, if you're doing a booklet versus you're doing, say, like a presentation, your facing pages, meaning page 1 is going to be by itself. Page 2 and 3 are going to be side by side, and page 4 is going to be by itself, meaning the front cover and the back cover are always going to be separate, but all the pages in between, whether it's 2 to 99, they're going to be side by side in a spread format. Number of columns. So columns are, you'll see in a second, helps you organize the grid. I'm sure you've looked at a magazine that has different columns. Usually the designer designed it on a column-based template, which is this what we're making now. So I'm going to put 4 columns for now. And now the margins. The margins is what you always see, on in Word, it's the space around the page. So generally speaking, that's 5.5. I mean, it's a 0.5, which is a ½ inch. Now, if we're making a document that would say 4x6, which is a flyer, then I would bump down my margins to say 0.25, which is a ½ inch. Because you always want a margin, but the smaller the document, the smaller the margins have to be. Also, the bigger the document. So for example, anything bigger than 11 by 17, which is a standard sheet of paper, standard tabloid paper, you can start to increase the margins. Now for the bleeds is what is on the outside of the page. So for example, if you have an image going to the edge of the page, it must go to the bleeds. This is a printing thing. So for example, when you see a magazine or a mass produced program or pamphlet, paper shifts in the printer. So if there's no information beyond the edge of the page, then it's going to print white instead of continuing to print the image. So you'll see when we actually go to the template, but generally speaking, that can stay at 0.25 all around. And then the slug, so you have to worry about the slug. So to go back over, the width is 8.5 by 11, pages are 4, columns are 4, margins is 0.5, and the bleed and slug is 0.25. And then we can give this a name. InDesign Basics. So now when I press create, you're going to see the document come up, and this is what we were talking about. If you look on the pages panel, which is here, you see we have 4 pages on the right-hand side, and page 1 and 4 by themselves, page 2 and 3 are together. Now, if you look on the actual document, you have the margin, which is the purplish pink line, the columns, which are broken up by the solid purple lines, and then the bleeds, there's outside. So the black line is the edge of the page, meaning the edge of a piece of paper. So the bleed goes beyond that. And if an image goes there, then that's what must go there, which is another image. Make sense? Any questions about how to set up a document?
No.
Nope, cool. All right, so now I'm going to go over, or any other questions about why we did what we did, rather? Nope, cool. All right, so next up, we're going to go over the different tools, and InDesign has a lot, as well as the actual panels themselves. So generally speaking, I have to go to Window, Workspace, and then we can go to Essentials Classic. So that'll put everything back to the basics. Now, if you're using your own CC, which you are, you may have something that's called the CC library. This is going to be tied to all of your programs. So Photoshop, Illustrator, Animate, After Effects. So these are assets, photos from Photoshop, graphics I made in Illustrator for animation class. All of these, I drag them into the library, in the CC library. Now I can just access them in any of the programs easily. But now for your standard panels, you have your pages panel, which again controls the pages as well as the master pages up here. You have the layers, you have the links, you have stroke, color, text wrap, swatches, character styles, and paragraph styles. So when it comes to these panels, it's always good to have these basic ones open. You can always go to Window, and you can always add more, but these are the basic ones you're generally be using, because in InDesign, at least the CC version, this top bar you see here at the very top above the actual artboard or pages, this changes based upon the tool you're on. So for example, when I click on the type tool, this bar would change to the type settings, meaning what font I choose, the leading, the kerning, the size, and all that kind of stuff. So this is a useful tool because it changes. So before you would go to Window and you would go to type in tables and you would show the character panel, you don't necessarily have to do that anymore because it's always going to be at the top now. So you have the black arrow tool, which is the selection tool. You have the white arrow tool, you have the page tool. Now the page tool edits the page. So if you wanted to change the size or have a custom sized page, that's how you change it. So if I wanted to make this page, if I wanted to make, say, page 3 longer or taller than the other pages, this is where I can do it at. I can edit just a single page. You have the gap tool, which you don't necessarily have to worry about. Then you have the content collector and content placer. You have the type tool, which is always going to be T for type across any of the Adobes. The line tool, which makes a single line, the pen tool, pencil tool, the rectangle frame tool, and the rectangle tool. The difference between these two tools are the rectangle tool makes a rectangular shape. So for example, I can go in and I can double click and make this a shape, a color. a colored shape. The rectangle frame tool is really just a placeholder. It's a box with an X in it. You can add color to it, but when you see a box with an X in it, much like when you're sketching, this is going to be a placeholder for an image. So in InDesign, you can lay out where your images are going to go before you even have your images, right? So I'm going to delete that, press delete. So now you have the scissor tool, you have the free transform tool, gradient swatch tool, gradient feather tool, note tool, and the theme tool. So for example, I'm going to go to my swatch library. I'm going to drag out an image. I can drag it out on here, and I can click on the rectangle frame tool, and it'll add that image into that place, into that rectangle frame tool. Now, this is the difference between the black arrow and the white arrow. Much like in Photoshop and Illustrator, the black arrow selects the whole shape of the whole rectangle frame tool. The white arrow, keyboard shortcut A, selects the image within the frame tool. So as you can see, this image is dramatically larger than the box itself. So you can either manually change it, or I can right click on it, or control left click if you're on a Mac. Fitting, and I can either fill frame proportionally, meaning it'll fill the frame all the way, but it may cut off some of the image, or I can fill content proportionally. It'll fit the entire image onto the frame, but it may not fill the frame all the way. I tend to go with fill frame proportionally, and then I can maneuver the image where I want it to be if I don't like, or you can just always make the rectangle frame bigger if you need be, if need be. So with that, are there any questions about the tools I just covered?
No.
Cool. All right, so next up would be the swatch tool. I mean the eyedropper tool. So the eyedropper tool, just like in Illustrator and Photoshop, it can eyedrop or select a color. So you have the eyedropper tool, or the measuring tool, or the color theme tool. So the eyedropper tool selects a color. The color theme tool selects the theme of the image itself, meaning it generally selects colors based upon the image that it's being selected. So it chose these 5 swatches, and they were all pulled from the basic colors, or a sample of the color theme within this image itself. So each image you select as a theme will be different, unless it's, for example, if I just took another image from the same photo shoot I did, they'll all pretty much be the same. But if you chose a different image, the color theme, so for example, if I were to choose a different image, let's say this one, for example, the one of me, if I were to do the swatch, it'll change the theme to be a different theme itself. Make sense? Any questions about that? So this tool is helpful when you're trying to, for example, add color to your text, and you don't know what to do. If you have a large main image on like a flyer, brochure, program, or even a spread layout, you can grab colors from the image, and they'll correlate because you pulled the color swatch theme from that image. So that's just a useful tool to have. That is a relatively new addition to the program. So now when it comes to adding text, it's very simple. Click on the text box and drag out the text box. Click on the text tool, type tool, and drag out the text box. Now, if you don't have your body copy already made, you can go to type and then go with fill with placeholder text. This is called Lorem Ipsum. This is placeholder text for any software that it mimics live text from a document. So now when you're doing with the text boxes, right click on it and you can go to text frame options or press Control B. Now, as you can see, we have 4 columns. We could say, turn on preview. We can say choose 4 columns and it'll break the text up into 4 columns. But just because you have a 4-column grid on your document doesn't mean you always have to stick to 4 columns. You could do 3, you could do 2, right? Or you can do 2, so I'm gonna press OK, and collapse it to fit within the 2. And then now, as you can see, we fit all that text across 2 columns. But when you look on the text box, you see on the bottom right-hand side, there's a little red square with a plus on it. That means there's more text on the, or in the text box than can fit. So you click on it, it'll grab that remainder text and it will load it up onto a different document. I mean, it loaded up onto the cursor to where you can then drag it out on a different text box. So we have a different text box, but it's the same text, meaning this is all linked together. Now, also when it comes time to editing the text, again, like I said, at the top bar, you have the text frame, so you can choose the type of font you want at the top. So this is the standard text selection method you have. Any questions about that so far?
No.
Are we sure? Cool. All right, so now going back over to the text options here. So when you're designing something, you, for example, have your character style sheets, or you can make a style sheet. So for example, say if you have a header, and it's, call it header. So say if you want a particular font for the header, and again, headers go across multiple pages on different sections, but you want to think about design consistency, meaning all your headers should be similar or should be the same. The only difference should be the text, meaning the wording of the header. So for example, I'm going to set this to be an 18-point font. I'm going to choose 20th Century MT. And yeah, that's it. So, and I want to change the color as well. I want to make it to be a orange color. Actually, no, I'm going to pull from this. I'm going to make this green, this green here. And let's make this header a little bigger, actually. Let's make this header 24. So now the header is green, this particular font, and 24. So when I go over to my character styles, character style sheet, I can click the plus sign. So when you click the plus sign and have a text selected, that's telling InDesign that I want all these settings to be set. So if I were to double click on this and go under basic format, it says the font I chose, the size I chose, and then it'll say what character color it is, and I can call this, I can change the setting to be header. Header style. Header style, and press OK. So now if I were to make another text box and type in header 2, all I have to do is click on it, click on the text box, not in it, but on it, and then click on the style, and it'll change it to be that exact same. Make sense? So that's how you can set up a style. So same thing for this. If I were to highlight a section of this body copy and then do the same thing, and I can call this body copy. So now when I make a new text box, all I do is click on body copy and it'll change the font to match this exact font, size, and color. Make sense? Any questions? Cool. So paragraph style is the same thing, just it controls the paragraph style, meaning the fact that this is justified and the actual leading and kerning. So if I were to click this, it'll just save the actual style of the fact that it's going to be justified with last line and line left, which by default is normally rag right, or it's called a line left, but most people call it rag right or rag left, meaning the left side is ragged versus the left side being ragged. Any questions about that? Nope, pretty straightforward. Cool. So now that's how you use the basic, getting the image on, adding text, editing the text, setting a character or a paragraph style, and choosing a swatch theme. So now when it comes to the pages, we have what's called the master page. So if you've ever worked at a magazine or looked at your favorite magazine, it's a 64 pages, 100-page magazine. The entire magazine is generally designed by a team, but that one team could be, 10 plus designers, photographers, copy editors, you name it. But they're all working from the same exact master pages and character style sheets, meaning no matter who has the document, they'll be able to produce the same style across the entire magazine because they're just working off of the master pages and the character and paragraph styles. So the master pages is just that. The master pages control all the non-design elements. Meaning, for example, the page numbers, even some of the headers can be put into the master pages because it's not a part of the actual live design. So for example, if I were to want to put this header on the master page, I can say Command X to cut. I can double click on the master page, A or A master. And if you see here, it's just 2 pages side by side. That means that when you were to drag this out, as you can see in the corner of each 4 of these pages says A. If we were to make a new master page, you can call it, prefix B, you can call it T for all I care. Number of pages, 2 pages, letter. Again, it's going to be the same standard size we're using. Press OK. So now we have a T master. So if we were to drag this down, we can simply add the T master to the page 1 and T master to page 4. But page 2 and 3 are going to be still on the A master. So double clicking on the A master, I'm going to Command V and place the header, but I'm going to place the header outside of the margins. And then I'm going to type tool, I'm going to, at the bottom of the page, I'm going to add a page number. So when you're adding a page number, you want to, again, choose a smaller font. Anything below 12 and above 9 works. And then I'm going to center it. And then instead of typing in 1, because again, if I were to type in 1, that's going to appear on all the pages, that number 1. What you want to do is go to type and insert special character. You have markers, symbols, hyphens, quotation marks, other. We want to go to markers. We want to go to current page number. So by default, this is going to say A. But when it's on the page 2, it's going to say number 2. So I'm going to drag this over. And I'm doing the Alt quick copy. So that now this letter A Let's say make it bold. Actually, can't make it bold. Let's use the Magneto font. So when we go back to page 2 and 3, it's going to read 2 and 3. And the header is here. Now you can't click on, you can edit the master pages on the current page, but you have to go to right click, you have to go to override all master page items. That's when you can edit it. But by default, this is the only way you can change this header word here is if you go back to the master page and edit it there. So for example, if I were to work on this, I wanted it to be mirrored on the other side. So then that's how you can set up a template to where you have the elements, meaning the page numbers, the headers, subheads even. Let me just do this. Let me cut this. File, edit, paste in place. But now, as you can see, page 1 and page 4 are still blank because A master is only active on 2 and 3. The 1 and 4 are T master. So you can always set that up separately, but generally speaking, the first page is going to be the cover page, which generally has a large image going across and then some kind of large title or flag going across the front. Any questions about that? How to set up, how to utilize master pages? Hello, is anybody there?
No questions from me.
Anybody else?
No questions.
Are we sure? So y'all can do this on your own now?
I mean, not as fast as you did it, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Let's see, if anybody else show up to class besides everyone? So that is a crash course in InDesign. Now, as far as some rules of thumb. So for example, when you're designing something, actually, I despise this font. Change this, this actually really bothered me. Regular, it's better. So when you're designing something in, really in anything, whether it be still using Photoshop, Illustrator, but definitely InDesign, you never want to have text butted up against an image like this. And you never want to have your text butted up against the edge of the page or the center or the crease of the page. You always want to make sure you have spacing between any graphic and any text. Unless it's a part of, say, like a large headline where like it's going over the image, and if it's something like that, that's different. But generally speaking, body copy, you also want to make sure you turn off the hyphen. But then also rag doesn't always work that way either. So you generally speaking want to make sure you always have at least, the 0.5 margin or 0.25 a gap between an image and text, or an image and a graphic, or the edge of a page, or the crease of the page and the text. Make sense?
I have a question. Because I looked down for a second. What was the purpose of you turning off the hyphenate or whatever that word was?
To me, that looks better.
Oh, okay, cool.
Design wise. I mean, because if not, if you leave it on, or like you turn off the hyphenate or the hyphen, it'll just have, these hang letters. So some people like it, some people don't. Generally speaking, you want to generally speaking, people prefer not to always have everything hanging off. So, I mean, because all it does is just pushes the word down to the next page. I mean, down to the next line.
Gotcha, I see it now. Thank you.
So, yeah. So now, generally speaking, so for example, say if you have a text, go to type, fill with text with a text. So now with the rectangle frame tool, you can have an ellipse frame tool and a polygon frame tool, meaning it doesn't have to be this particular shape. You can always you can choose the sides, but just meaning you can have a triangle, so on and so forth. But it just means a sided, meaning more than the four sides. So the ellipse. Now, when it comes to using the rectangle frame tools, from a template design standpoint, I like to work where I always just give it some kind of color, and then I'll lower the tint so that I know it's not supposed to be a shape color, like a colored shape, but it's really, so essentially I give it a tint so I can still see the X, so that I know this is really where an image goes. So I'm gonna go to my library, I'm gonna drag out another image temporarily. Fitting, fill frame proportionately. So for example, now this image is over text. Now this text frame box, let's say to give it 3 columns, right? And then I'm gonna click on, actually double click on this. You make a new character style. So I'm gonna call this body copy 2. And then when I click on this, it's gonna update it to that. So now this image covers text. So that this is when the text wrap comes in. So with the text wrap, you can click on the rectangle one, which, since you're using an ellipse, it'll just push it to be around, the invisible square that's around all circles, right? Or you have the wrap around shape object to where it wraps around the actual shape of the person in the actual image itself. So what it does is, much like in Photoshop, they have a with the 2021 update, they have the select object feature, to where it really saves a lot of time in terms of how to select an object from its background. In InDesign, it does something similar to it, but it really just pushes the person, like it traces around the person, or reads the image, finds the object that's not the background. Usually it just, reads if there's a pattern in it, like the brick is a pattern, and it says everything that's not the pattern, that must be the person, so it wraps around the person. So this means you can select subject. You can change that to be the bounding box, which is now the circle, right? It's no longer the person. It's the circle itself that's being selected. Now, unless I were to cut this person out and remove the background, I would prefer to have the text wrap around the circle versus the person, because the person still has the background. Make sense? So that's the difference. So if you were to click on this with the new InDesign, it has, because 2020 didn't have this option. So really the same thing. So same as clipping. Again, same as the text edges. Now, if you were to say bring in a PNG or a TIFF file from Photoshop, and you had removed the person, then this same as clipping would do the same thing as the select subject would do, but you had already selected subject. Make sense? So for now, we just really needs to utilize the bounding box, meaning it's going to go around in a circular motion around the circle. Instead of it being a square, instead of it being the square of the circle, it's going around the actual shape of the circle. Make sense?